They waited until I was on blood pressure medication. They waited until my hip was sore and my hearing wasn't what it used to be. They waited until they thought I was too old, too tired, and too trusting to notice. And then my own children, the three people I gave everything to, sat around a kitchen table and carved up my life savings like a Thanksgiving turkey, without asking me, without telling me, without a shred of shame. But here's what they didn't count on. I wasn't some helpless old woman sleeping through her own robbery. I was Lorraine Hadley, and I had a very good attorney on speed dial. My name is Lorraine, and before I get into this, I want to know, where are you watching from today? Go ahead and drop your city or your state in the comments. I love knowing who's out there listening. Whether you're in Texas or Tennessee or sitting in your kitchen in Ohio with a cup of coffee, I'm glad you're here. Because this story, it's one I never thought I'd have to tell. Let me take you back to the beginning so you understand how we got here. Because none of this makes sense unless you know who I was before my children decided I owed them something. I was born in 1957 in Decatur, Illinois. Small town, quiet streets, the kind of place where people left their front doors unlocked and kids rode bikes until the streetlights came on. My father worked at a grain elevator, and my mother kept the house and raised 4 children with more patience than any one woman should have been asked to have. We weren't wealthy. We weren't poor either. We were solid. That's the word my father used. We're solid, Lorraine. Don't ever be ashamed of solid. I carried that with me my whole life. Through school, through college, through 38 years of balancing other people's books. Solid meant you didn't panic. Solid meant you kept records. Solid meant the ground under your feet was there because you put it there, brick by brick, and nobody could take it out from under you unless you let them. I married Gerald Hadley in 1979. We were both 22. He was an electrician, licensed, union, the whole thing. Broad shoulders, quiet voice. The kind of man who fixed things instead of talking about them. I got my degree in accounting from Illinois State, and by the time we were 25, I was working at a mid-size firm in Springfield doing tax preparation and bookkeeping. We weren't flashy people. We didn't drive luxury cars or take European vacations. But we were disciplined. Every paycheck, a portion went straight to savings. Every bonus, same thing. Every tax refund, straight into savings or investments. Gerald used to say, "The money you don't see is the money that saves you." And I believed him, because year after year, that invisible money grew. We had 3 children. Our oldest, Dean, born in 1982. Then Patricia, we called her Trish, in 1984. And our youngest, Kevin, in 1988. I won't sit here and tell you they were angels. They were kids. Dean was stubborn from the day he could talk. Always had to be right. Always had to win the argument, even when he was 10 years old debating bedtime. Trish was dramatic in the way teenage girls can be. Everything was the end of the world until it wasn't. And Kevin was sweet, but easily influenced by whoever had his ear last. The kind of kid who'd agree with the last person who spoke to him. But I loved them with everything I had. Gerald and I both did. We sat through every school play, every basketball game, every parent-teacher conference. We drove carpool at 6 in the morning and helped with science projects at 11 at night. That's what you do. You don't keep a tally. You don't hand your children an invoice for being their parent. We put all 3 of them through college. Not Ivy League schools, but good state universities. We paid tuition, room, board, books, every single cent. Dean studied business at the University of Illinois. Trish went into education at Eastern Illinois. Kevin got a communications degree from Northern Illinois that he never really used. After they graduated, Gerald and I helped each one of them get started in life. We gave Dean $30,000 toward his first house, wrote him a check without hesitation. We co-signed a car loan for Trish when she was starting her teaching career and couldn't get approved on her own. We helped Kevin pay off credit card debt he'd racked up in his 20s. Twice. The second time, Gerald sat him down and said, "This is the last time, son." Kevin nodded. I don't think he even remembered that conversation a year later. And through all of that, Gerald and I kept saving. We never touched our retirement, never dipped into our investments for a vacation or a remodel. By the time we were in our 50s, we had just over $1.2 million between our retirement accounts, our savings, and a small investment portfolio I managed myself. Not a fortune by some standards. But for two people from Decatur, Illinois, who started with nothing, that was a lifetime of restraint, discipline, and sacrifice. Gerald passed in 2016. Pancreatic cancer. Fast and cruel. He was diagnosed in March and gone by July. 4 months from a doctor's office to a cemetery. I'm not going to dwell on that because even now, almost 10 years later, it still takes the air out of me if I sit with it too long. What I will say is this. Gerald left everything to me. His pension, his life insurance, our joint accounts, the house. He trusted me completely, and I managed that money the same way we always had, carefully, quietly, and with purpose. After Gerald died, the kids were attentive for about 6 months, phone calls every other day, Sunday visits with groceries, casseroles left on the porch with little notes. A dean came and fixed the leaky faucet in the upstairs bathroom. Trish organized the photos from the funeral into an album. Kevin flew in from Colorado twice. But life moves on, and I understood that. Dean had his consulting business. Trish had her classroom and her 2 boys and a husband who traveled for work. Kevin was doing whatever Kevin was doing out in Denver, some marketing job that seemed to change every 18 months. I didn't hold their distance against them. I didn't sit by the phone waiting. I kept busy. I volunteered at the public library 2 mornings a week. I played bridge on Wednesdays with a group I'd been part of for 20 years. I had lunch with my friend Bev every Friday at the same diner we'd been going to since 1998. I was fine. I was more than fine. I was managing my life exactly the way I wanted to. In 2022, when I officially retired, I was 65. My health was decent. High blood pressure controlled by medication. A hip that got stiff in cold weather. Reading glasses I kept losing. Nothing dramatic. I had my house, which was paid off. I had my savings, which by that point had grown to just under $1.4 million, thanks to careful management and compound interest. I had Social Security and a small pension from the accounting firm. I wasn't rich, but I was comfortable, and I planned to stay that way for a long time. That's when things started to shift. Slowly at first. So slowly I almost didn't notice. Dean called me the week after my retirement party. A small gathering at my house, nothing fancy, just Bev and a few friends and the kids. And he said, "Mum, now that you're retired, we should probably talk about your finances. Make sure everything is set up right for this next chapter." I thought that was a normal thing for a child to say. He had a business degree. He worked with numbers. I thought he was being helpful, being a good son. "Sure, honey," I told him. "We can sit down and go over things whenever you want." But it wasn't just Dean. Within a month, Trish called separately and said almost the same thing, almost word for word. "Mum, I think we need to have a family conversation about your accounts, just to make sure everything is in order. You know, for peace of mind." And then Kevin, who couldn't manage his own checking account, he sent me a text message that said, "Hey, Mum, Dean mentioned you guys are going to talk about the money situation. I want to be part of that." The money situation, that's what he called it. Like my life savings was a problem that needed to be solved. Like it was a burden sitting there in those accounts, weighing everyone down. I agreed to a family meeting. All four of us, at Dean's house, a Saturday afternoon in September. I drove over thinking we'd discuss power of attorney, maybe a will update, maybe talk about what happens if I need long-term care someday. Normal estate planning conversations that families have. Responsible things. What happened instead was something I will never forget as long as I live. Dean had printed out spreadsheets, actual spreadsheets, color-coded, with columns and percentages and highlighted cells. Trish had a yellow legal pad covered in notes. I could see bullet points and dollar signs from across the table. Kevin sat at the far end, looking uncomfortable, fidgeting with his phone. But he was there. And the fact that he was there, that all three of them were prepared, organized, and sitting in their seats before I even arrived, that told me everything. They had discussed this beforehand. Rehearsed it, maybe. Without me. About me. Dean started. He used his business voice, the one he uses with clients. Smooth, measured, like he was presenting a quarterly report. Mum, we've been talking, and we think the fairest thing to do is start distributing your assets now, while you're healthy and can be part of the decision. We don't want to wait until something happens and then deal with lawyers and probate and court fees and all that mess. This way, everyone's taken care of. I sat there and listened. I sipped the coffee Trish had made, which was too weak, by the way. She always makes it too weak. And I let him talk. He slid a spreadsheet across the table to me. It had my accounts listed on it. Every single one. Accounts he should not have known the balances of. My savings account at First Midwest. My investment portfolio at the brokerage. My traditional IRA. My Roth IRA. My pension payout structure. Everything was listed with decimal point precision, down to the cent. How do you have these numbers? I asked. Dean didn't blink. I called your financial advisor. Told him we were helping you with estate planning. You called Richard? Behind my back? It wasn't behind your back, Mum. It was for your benefit. We needed accurate numbers to put together a fair plan. I looked at Trish. She was nodding. Slowly. Deliberately. Like this was the most reasonable thing in the world. Like I should have been grateful. We think a three-way even split makes sense, Dean continued. About 460,000 each, roughly. We'd leave you enough for day-to-day living expenses. Social Security covers most of that anyway. And we'd move the rest into a shared family account that we'd manage together. We'd handle the investments, the tax implications, all of it. You wouldn't have to worry about a thing. I put down my coffee cup. I remember the sound it made on the wooden table. A small, clean click. The room went still. You want to take my money? I said. It wasn't a question. It was a statement, flat and cold and precise. We're not taking anything, Mom, Trish said quickly. We're restructuring. Think of it like a family trust. You don't need 1.4 million sitting in accounts when you have a paid-off house and Social Security. And frankly, it would help all of us right now. Dean's consulting business took a major hit last year. I'm still paying off orthodontic bills for Tyler, and my credit cards are stretched thin. And Kevin's rent in Denver. I didn't ask what Kevin needs, I said. The table went dead silent. Kevin finally spoke. He'd been staring at the table the whole time, and when he looked up, his eyes were glassy. And what he said, I swear to you, it felt like someone pressed a hot iron to the center of my chest. Mum, we're not trying to hurt you, but we've sacrificed too. All those years we came over for holidays, helped with the house after Dad died, drove you to your doctor's appointments, spent our weekends mowing your lawn and cleaning your gutters. We gave up our time, our energy, our own family time. And honestly, we feel like you owe us for that, for years of sacrifice. I owe them, My children told me I owed them, for loving them, for raising them, for paying for their college education and their first cars and their credit card debt and their weddings and their starter homes. I owed them because they had the basic human decency to visit their widowed mother on Christmas and mow her lawn twice a month. I stood up. I didn't yell. I didn't throw anything. I didn't cry. Not there. Not in front of them. I picked up my purse from the kitchen counter, and I looked at each one of them, one at a time. Dean first, then Trish, then Kevin. "I'm going home now," I said. My voice was steady. I made sure of that. "And I want you all to think very carefully about what just happened at this table. Because I have. I walked out the front door, and I drove home in complete silence. No radio, no phone call to Bev, no tears, just the hum of the engine and the sound of my own breathing and the long, flat Illinois road stretching out ahead of me. And somewhere between Dean's house and my driveway, somewhere along Route 4, past the soybean fields and the old grain co-op, something inside me shifted. Not broke. Shifted. Like a gear clicking into the position it was always meant to be in. I wasn't sad. I wasn't confused. I was clear. Clearer than I had been in years. The next morning, Sunday, I called Richard, my financial advisor. I told him exactly what had happened at that table. I told him my son had called his office pretending to act on my behalf and obtained confidential financial information without my knowledge or consent. And I told him that if he ever disclosed my account details to anyone other than me again, for any reason, under any circumstances, I would file a formal complaint with every regulatory board and licensing authority that would listen. He apologized. He said Dean had been convincing and had implied he had my full authorization. I told Richard I didn't care how convincing Dean was. I told him to put a verbal passcode on every one of my accounts immediately, a passcode that only I would know. He did it before we hung up the phone. On Monday morning at 8 sharp, I called my attorney. His name was Frank Rowan. Gerald and I had used Frank for 30 years. Our wills, the house deed, a business dispute Gerald had back in 2009, my mother's estate when she passed. Frank was 71 years old, semi-retired, and still sharp as a scalpel. When I told him everything, the meeting, the spreadsheet, the phone call to Richard, he was quiet for a long time. Then he said 5 words. "Lorraine, come to my office." That afternoon, I sat across from Frank's desk with a manila folder 3 inches thick. I had brought bank statements, account summaries, the spreadsheet Dean had printed. I'd taken a photo of it with my phone before I left his house, because something in my gut told me to document everything. I brought records of every financial gift Gerald and I had ever given our children. Every check, every wire transfer, every co-signed loan, every tuition payment. I had kept meticulous records for decades because that's who I am. Because I'm an accountant. Because Gerald taught me that the money you track is the money you keep. Frank reviewed everything for over an hour, page by page, line by line, and then he took off his reading glasses, set them on his desk, and looked at me with an expression I'd never seen on his face before. "Lorraine," he said, "they've already started." "What do you mean, started?" He turned his computer screen toward me. "A transfer request. Filed 4 days before that Saturday meeting. 4 days before they even sat me down at that table. Dean had submitted a request to move $200,000 from my investment account into a newly opened account, one that listed his name as co-holder. The request was pending approval. It hadn't gone through yet, but it was there. Submitted with an electronic signature, a signature that was not mine. My hands started shaking, not from fear, not from sadness, from a rage so deep and so clean it felt almost calm. Frank moved fast. That same Monday afternoon, he filed an emergency hold request on every financial account I owned: savings accounts, investment accounts, my IRA, my Roth, my pension distributions. Everything was frozen solid. Nothing moved in or out without my explicit, notarized written authorization delivered in person. Then he drafted 3 certified letters, one to each of my children, informing them that any further attempt to access, transfer, redirect, or even inquire about my financial accounts would be treated as attempted financial elder abuse under Illinois state law. The letter cited the specific statute. It included the penalty, a Class 2 felony, punishable by 3 to 7 years in state prison and fines up to $25,000. If you're watching this right now, and any part of this story has felt familiar, if you've ever had someone in your life try to take what's yours and dress it up as love, I need you to do something for me. Hit that subscribe button right now, because there are more stories like mine that need to be told, and nobody is going to protect us if we don't start protecting each other. Now, let me tell you what happened next, because my children did not go quietly. Dean called me 14 times that Tuesday. 14 times. I didn't answer a single one. Trish left a voicemail that started sweet and turned desperate. "Mum, this is a huge overreaction. We were trying to help you. You're going to destroy this family over a misunderstanding. Please just call me back." Kevin sent a text message so long it came in 3 parts. A novel about how he felt blindsided and disrespected by the legal letter. He said I was treating them like criminals. He said Gerald would be ashamed of what I was doing. That last part, invoking Gerald's name, that one stung. I sat with it for about 10 minutes. Then I deleted the message. I let Frank handle everything from that point on. Every phone call, every text, every email from any of my 3 children. I forwarded it to Frank's office, and his paralegal logged it. That was our agreement. I didn't trust myself to speak to them without saying something I'd regret. And more importantly, I didn't trust them not to twist my words into something they could use against me later. 3 days after the letters arrived, Dean hired his own attorney, a young guy, mid-30s, from his professional network. This attorney sent a formal letter to Frank claiming that Dean had implied verbal authority to manage my accounts based on our family conversation, and that the transfer request was part of a cooperative family financial planning initiative that I had conceptually agreed to at the September meeting. Frank's response was 4 pages long. I won't walk you through every paragraph of legal language, but the summary was devastating. There was no power of attorney, written, verbal, or implied. There was no signed authorization. There was no agreement of any kind. And the electronic signature on that $200,000 transfer request was forged. Frank had already subpoenaed the IP address logs from the brokerage's security department. The signature had been submitted from Dean's home computer, from his personal IP address. On a Tuesday afternoon when I was at Bridge Club 30 miles away. That's not financial planning. That's fraud. Plain, documentable fraud. Frank recommended a full forensic audit of all activity on my accounts over the past 12 months. I agreed without hesitation. And what that audit uncovered made my stomach turn. Over the previous 8 months, 8 months before that Saturday meeting, Dean had been systematically positioning himself to take control of my finances. He had called my bank 3 separate times, each time asking slightly different questions about account holder policies, authorized user additions, and transfer procedures. And he had requested, and received, duplicate account statements mailed to his home address by telling the bank he was helping his mother organize her paperwork. He had contacted my life insurance company to ask about beneficiary designations and payout timelines. And he had spoken to a real estate agent in Springfield about running a comparative market analysis on my home. My home. The house Gerald built the deck on with his own hands. The house where I rocked 3 babies to sleep. The house where I sat in the living room every evening for 8 years after Gerald died, reading in his chair because it still smelled like him. Dean was pricing it, calculating what it was worth so he could add it to his spreadsheet. Trish's involvement was less direct, but no less calculated. She had been the one to suggest, months earlier, that I switch from paper banking to online banking. "It's so much easier, Mum. You can see everything on your phone." She came over one afternoon and helped me set it all up. And during that process, while I was making us sandwiches in the kitchen and she was sitting at my computer, she had quietly added Dean's email address as a secondary notification contact on 2 of my accounts. That's how he was getting real-time balance updates. That's how he knew the exact numbers, down to the decimal, on that spreadsheet. Kevin's role was different. He was the emotional lever, the pressure point. Every few weeks he'd call from Denver and casually mention how expensive everything was, how his rent had gone up again, how he wished he could visit more often, but flights were $300, how all his friends' parents were helping out. He never directly asked for money. He never said, "Mum, give me cash." He just made sure the guilt was there, dripping slowly, like a faucet that won't stop. And I now understood that every single one of those phone calls was coordinated. They were a strategy. I was being worked. They had planned this together. Not in a single conversation over beers. Over months. Slowly, methodically, patiently. The way you boil a frog. You raise the temperature so gradually, so gently, that by the time the frog realizes what's happening, it's already too late. But this frog noticed. This frog was a certified public accountant with 38 years of experience and a very good memory. Frank filed a formal complaint with the Illinois Department on Aging. He also filed a report with the State Attorney General's office under the Illinois Financial Exploitation of Elderly Persons Act. And he submitted the forged electronic signature evidence directly to the brokerage's internal fraud investigation unit. Within 2 weeks, the brokerage launched a full investigation. They pulled security camera footage from the branch Dean had visited, reviewed every recorded phone call in their system, and flagged Dean's previous contacts with their support line. 3 of those calls had been recorded. In one of them, and this is the one that changed everything, Dean had explicitly told a customer service representative that his mother was showing early signs of cognitive decline, and that the family was trying to get her financial affairs organized before the situation deteriorated further. "I do not have cognitive decline. I have never had cognitive decline. My personal physician confirmed it in writing, and to eliminate any possible doubt, Frank had me undergo a complete neuropsychological evaluation at a respected clinic in Springfield. 3 hours of testing, memory, reasoning, problem-solving, executive function, every measure they had. I scored in the 92nd percentile for my age group. My memory was sharp. My judgment was intact. My ability to manage complex financial decisions was not just adequate, it was exceptional. I was a certified public accountant for nearly 4 decades. I managed multi-million-dollar accounts for businesses and individuals across central Illinois. The suggestion that I couldn't handle my own retirement fund was not just wrong, it was a calculated lie designed to give my son access to my money. And that lie was now sitting on a recorded telephone call, in the hands of a fraud investigator, with my attorney standing guard over it. Dean's attorney called Frank in early November and requested a meeting. Off the record, just to talk. Frank agreed to the meeting, but only under one condition. I would be present. Dean didn't want that. Frank told him that was the only way it was happening, take it or leave it. So we met. A Tuesday morning at Frank's office. Dean, his young attorney, Frank, and me. Dean looked like he hadn't slept properly in weeks. His suit was wrinkled. His face was drawn. His eyes were bloodshot. He didn't look at me when he walked in. He sat down across the table and stared at his hands. His attorney did the talking. Practiced, careful words about how Dean deeply regretted the misunderstanding and how things had escalated beyond anyone's intention. Dean was willing to formally relinquish any claim to my assets, sign a binding agreement to never contact my financial institutions again, and issue a written apology. In exchange, they wanted me to withdraw the complaint with the state and agree not to pursue criminal charges. Frank looked at me. I looked at Dean. "Dean," I said, "look at me." He raised his eyes, and for one brief moment, just a flicker, I saw the little boy who used to sit on Gerald's lap while he read the Sunday paper. The boy who cried on his first day of kindergarten and held my hand so tight I thought my fingers would break. The boy who brought me a dandelion bouquet every spring and said, "These are for the prettiest mom in Decatur." That boy was gone. "You didn't just try to take my money," I said. "You told a complete stranger that your mother was losing her mind. You forged my signature on a financial document. You recruited your brother and sister into a scheme to strip me of everything I spent my life building. You treated me like I was already dead, and you were just picking through what was left." He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. His attorney put a hand on his arm. "I'm not dropping anything," I said. "Not until I am completely satisfied that this can never happen again. Not to me. Not to anyone else." Trish tried a different strategy. She showed up at my house unannounced on a Saturday morning in late November, standing on my porch with a box of pastries from the bakery I like, and tears already streaming down her face. "Mama, please," she said. "This is tearing our family apart. We made a mistake. Can we just talk? Just you and me, mother and daughter, the way we used to?" I stood in the doorway with my hand on the frame and I said, "Trish, everything goes through Frank now. I love you, but I don't trust you right now. And until I do, this is how it has to be." She stood on my porch and sobbed, and I closed the door softly. And then I walked to my kitchen table and sat down, and I cried too. Because that's the part nobody tells you about standing up for yourself at this age. It doesn't feel like victory. It feels like surgery without anesthesia. You're doing what has to be done, what you know is right, and it's cutting you wide open at the same time. Kevin sent an email, a real, thoughtful email, 2 days later. It was the most honest thing any of my children had communicated through this entire ordeal. He wrote that he'd been pressured by Dean for months, that Dean had presented the whole plan as something I wanted, something I'd be relieved by. That by the time Kevin realized how far it had gone, he felt trapped. He said he was ashamed of himself. He said he didn't expect forgiveness, but wanted me to know the truth. I forwarded the email to Frank. Frank said it was potentially valuable as a corroborating admission. I told Frank I didn't want to use Kevin's honesty as a weapon. But I also wasn't ready to forgive. Not yet. Maybe not for a long time. Here's how it ended. The brokerage completed its internal investigation and permanently flagged Dean's name in their system. He was barred from contacting them regarding any account he was not the sole legal holder of. They reported the forged signature incident to federal financial regulators. The Illinois Department on Aging completed their inquiry and classified the case as confirmed financial exploitation of an elderly person. That classification goes into a permanent state record. It doesn't automatically trigger criminal prosecution, but it creates a documented paper trail. And Frank made absolutely certain that paper trail was thick enough to stand on. In January of the following year, Frank brokered a formal settlement agreement. All 3 of my children signed it. The terms were non-negotiable. First, none of them would ever contact my bank, my brokerage, my insurance company, my financial advisor, or any institution holding my assets. Ever. For any reason. Violation would trigger an automatic criminal referral. Second, Dean would repay the full costs of my legal fees, the forensic audit, and the neuropsychological evaluation. The total came to just over $22,000. He paid it in full within 60 days. Third, my entire estate plan was restructured from the ground up. I removed all three of my children as direct beneficiaries of my investment accounts. I redirected those assets into a revocable trust, controlled entirely by me during my lifetime, and administered by Frank's firm after my passing. The trust would distribute funds according to my stated wishes, which I reserved the absolute right to amend at any time, for any reason, without notice or explanation to anyone. Fourth, and this was my condition, not Frank's, I included a provision that if any of my children demonstrated, over time, genuine accountability, sustained effort, and a restored relationship with me built on honesty and respect, I could choose to amend the trust to include them. But that door would open on my terms, in my time, at my discretion. Nobody else's. I unfroze my accounts in February. Every single cent was exactly where it belonged. $1,397,000. Untouched. Intact. Mine. I'm 70 now. I still live in my house. I still play bridge on Wednesdays and have lunch with Bev on Fridays. Kevin and I have started talking again. Carefully, slowly, like two people learning to walk on ice. Trish sends a card on my birthday and at Christmas. Dean and I haven't spoken in over a year. I don't tell this story for sympathy. I tell it because somewhere right now, someone's child is looking at their parent's bank statement and doing the math. And that parent needs to hear this. Your money is yours. Your home is yours. Your dignity is yours. No one is entitled to any of it, not even the people you love most in this world. Gerald used to say, "The money you don't see is the money that saves you." He was right about that. But I'll add my own. The strength you don't know you have is the strength that saves you. Trust it. It's been there all along. Thank you for listening. I'll see you in the next one.